All right, so moving on to the next segment, I'll be sharing my fight prediction for this weekend's fight taking place in the sport of boxing between Stephen Fulton and Brandon Figueroa. So this is a highly anticipated rematch that will be taking place on the David Benavidez and David Morrell undercard. This will be the co-main event slot on that card to kick off PBC for the calendar year 2025. Brandon Figueroa will be defending his WBC featherweight title in a highly anticipated rematch against Stephen Fulton. So these are the following storylines that I have heading into this highly anticipated rematch between Stephen Fulton and Brandon Figueroa. So the bad blood from 2021. That was one of the best fights that I see in the calendar year 2021. That's in the conversation for Fight of the Year in 2021. The classic that Stephen Fulton and Brandon Figueroa gave us back a few years ago. It was a title unification at the junior featherweight division, and it was a close fight, with Stephen Fulton winning the fight by split decision to become the unified champion at that junior featherweight division. Now, it was close, and the bad blow was there because after the fight, Stephen Fulton's getting interviewed as he became the WBC and WBO unified champion, and Brandon Figueroa was cutting him off during his post-fight speech after his victory, saying that they could run it back, and it would probably be at the 126-pound division, which is the featherweight division. Fast forward 3.5 years later, and here we are, the highly anticipated rematch. And we're going to see if it lives up to the hype and its own expectations, that it could possibly be even more entertaining than the first fight that these respective fighters had in 2021. So definitely the bad blood will be settled in the boxing ring in the rematch. Now, next storyline is, can Stephen Fulton go back to being an elite fighter? And what I mean by that is, I think Stephen Fulton is still a tremendous fighter. But in terms of being that elite fighter, can Cool Boy Steph get back to who he used to be? Because I've seen flaws in Stephen Fulton's last two fights. Obviously, in 2023, the summer of 2023, when he went over to Japan and got crushed by Inoue Inoue in a junior featherweight undisputed championship fight, got decimated and steamrolled and destroyed, losing by knockout by the hands of Inoue Inoue. And there's no shame of that. Inoue Inoue is a top 3 pound-for-pound fighter in the sport of boxing today. But it's just the way how he performed against Inoue Inoue. He was like a ghost he was like a fighter that wasn't used to these big-time moments or being in the spotlight when Inoue Inoue destroyed him. And then when he had his return fight on the Canelo Alvarez versus Edgar Berlanga undercard against Carlos Castro, he didn't look like the same Stephen Fulton that I've seen in the past. He got dropped in the 5th round of that fight and barely escaped with a victory against Carlos Castro by the skin of his teeth by a split decision on that Canelo Alvarez versus Edgar Berlanga card. And his defense didn't look that great. And that was the last time we saw Stephen Fulton. So I want to see, based off those two performances, can Stephen Fulton get back to being an elite fighter, being a great fighter, and most importantly, becoming a champion again against Brandon Figueroa in this highly anticipated rematch. But let's get into the tail of the tape here. Starting off with the challenger, Stephen Fulton. He's 22-1, 22 victories, 1 loss to his resume. He has 8 victories come away of knockout, stands at 5'6", and has a reach of 70 inches. Then I'm looking at the champion, Brandon Figueroa. He has 25 victories, 1 loss to his resume. He has 19 victories come away of knockout. Currently the reigning defending WBC featherweight champion, stands at 5'9" and has a reach of 72 inches. So the height and the reach goes in favor of the champion, Brandon Figueroa. And we're going to see if the height and reach plays a factor for him in this highly anticipated rematch. But these are the following game plans that I had for these respective fighters to follow if they want to walk away with that coveted WBC featherweight title. Starting off with Stephen Fulton. Stephen Fulton's got to fight in different angles in this fight. He's got to move around the boxing ring effectively, swiftly. He's got to fight in different angles. He's got to use his speed. And if he could use his speed fighting in different angles, he could comfortably set up traps for Brandon Figueroa, and he could capitalize on those traps that he sets in the boxing ring. That could go a long way for him if he gets a decision victory in this ring, and to frustrate the champion, Brandon Figueroa. Now, next, Stephen Fulton's got to outbox Brandon Figueroa. Now, realistically, if you're talking about boxing skills, which boxer has the better boxing skills, I would give that in favor of Stephen Fulton over Brandon Figueroa's boxing skills. But he can't make the fight difficult. Stephen Fulton cannot make the fight difficult. Struggles when Stephen Fulton struggles when the fight is if the fight turns into a phone booth fight. And what I mean by that is a phone booth fight where it's me and you, for example, for you guys watching and listening. We're standing toe-to-toe, face-to-face, just slugging it out. Stephen Fulton doesn't do that well in the boxing ring. And his style of fighting, Stephen Fulton has to move in different angles, precisely move around, use his footwork to outbox his opponents. When it's a phone booth fight, that's when Stephen Fulton struggles. So I think he's got to stay out of those situations. He's got to establish the jab and control the pace of the fight, moving around precisely in that boxing ring, and not staying toe-to-toe, face-to-face with Brandon Figueroa the entire duration of the fight. And last but not least, I think Stephen Fulton's got to capitalize on Brandon Figueroa's mistakes. Now, he did that in the first fight, a very close fight when these two respective fighters fought years ago. And at times, Brandon Figueroa in the boxing ring can let his hands down when he's doing things in the boxing ring. He throws a punch, and like, for example, if he throws a jab and the other hand is down and he's not there to protect himself, Brandon Figueroa leaves his hands down a lot in the boxing ring. So I think if Stephen Fulton can capitalize on that, land the cleaner shots, that could possibly help him in a possible situation where the judges have to get involved and he gets a possible decision victory. So those are the game plans that I have for Stephen Fulton. Now for Brandon Figueroa, I think Brandon Figueroa is going to have to press Stephen Fulton up on the ropes and go to the body. He did that effectively in the first fight at times where he would walk down Stephen Fulton, pin him up on the ropes as he's walking him down. And I think if he could do that, going downstairs to the body, like he did in the first fight, he could find a lot of success in that boxing ring. Now, next, the head movement for Brandon Figueroa is going to have to be very important for this fight. He's got to get out of a lot of defensive situations in this fight with the head movement. He cannot afford to get hit with the cleaner shots this time. That could possibly cost him in a decision victory, for a decision loss, I should say. Why? I think that's the reason why the judges believe that Brandon Figueroa lost the first fight. It's because Stephen Fulton, even though Brandon Figueroa outlanded him, I believe, on the judges' score or in the copy box, that Stephen Fulton was landing the cleaner shots. So this time around, your head moving, you got to move around with your head on a swivel. Cannot afford to get hit several times in that boxing ring. And last but not least, Brandon Figueroa's got to use that right hand. Now, I think that's his best shot in his arsenal, in his toolbox, that right hand that Brandon Figueroa possesses. And I think if he can explode fighting with the right hand, fighting on the inside on Stephen Fulton, and land the right hand to the jaw, he could possibly score some knockdowns or a knockout victory in this rematch against Stephen Fulton. So those are the respective game plans that I have for these respective fighters to follow. But with that being said, I'm going to go with Brandon Figueroa to successfully retain his featherweight title against Stephen Fulton in the co-main event slot of the David Benavidez versus David Morrell card. I think he's going to retain that WBC title. I think Brandon Figueroa is going to fix up on the small mistakes that he had when him and Stephen Fulton fought the first time in 2021. That this is a really highly anticipated rematch. So I think he's going to be hungry for a victory. I think Brandon Figueroa is going to work on his head movement, move around in their boxing ring swiftly so he doesn't get caught with some shots that Stephen Fulton could land. I think also Brandon Figueroa is going to establish the power here. I'm looking for that signature right hand that is the best shot, the best punch that Brandon Figueroa has in his arsenal, in his toolbox. I think he's also going to get the better of Stephen Fulton in the boxing exchanges as well this time. I think he's going to go back to a game plan that he had in the first fight, where in situations Brandon Figueroa pinned Stephen Fulton up on the ropes a lot as he was walking him down, being the aggressor in the first fight. I think he's going to do that again. But he's going to have Stephen Fulton pin on the ropes in situations. And I think when he has him pinned on the ropes, he's going to go to the body, shut down Stephen Fulton, break his will. Go to the body, slow down Stephen Fulton. And I think he's just going to outbox him in this rematch. And I like Brandon Figueroa winning this fight by split decision against Stephen Fulton to retain his featherweight title and the co-main event slot of this David Benavidez versus David Morrell card. But that is my Brandon Figueroa versus Stephen Fulton fight prediction.